It's been 10 years since the last Dragon Age game was released, and in 2024 we're finally getting a sequel. So I decided to revisit 2014's Game of the Year, Dragon Age Inquisition, and see if it's still worth playing today. And that's what we're going to talk about in this video. I'll be keeping this review spoiler free, but I do plan on doing a longer deep dive critique of the game later this year, so be sure to subscribe if you're interested in seeing that. The TLDR is, yes, I absolutely think Dragon Age Inquisition is worth playing today. It's far from a perfect game, but it has satisfying combat and tells an incredible story with some of my favorite characters in any RPG. But without further ado, let's buckle up, grab some iced coffee, and dive into Dragon Age Inquisition 10 years later. One of the most important aspects of an RPG is having the latitude to create the exact character you want to roleplay as. And while the character models in this game look like they escaped from a wax museum, I gotta say, Dragon Age Inquisition has one of the most impressive character creators in the RPG genre, especially for its time. At the start of the game, you can choose your character class, gender, and race. This is all standard stuff, but the most impressive thing to me is that Bioware hired 4 different voice actors, 2 Americans and 2 Brit-bongers, to give us additional options for the protagonist. This is nearly unheard of in RPGs where your character actually has a significant amount of dialogue. And Inquisition is a certified yap fest, so I commend the devs for giving us more than 1 or 2 options for our character's voice. Inquisition also has more race options than any other Dragon Age game. You can play as an elf, dwarf, human, or those big horny bastards, the Kunari. You'll also choose your character class, mage, warrior, or rogue. Warriors have 2 variations, sword and shield or 2-handed weapon wielders. Rogues also divide between archers and dual daggers. Your choice of race may limit your class options. For instance, dwarves cannot be mages, no matter how much Dagna wants them to be.
No, they ruin everything!
Each class has 3 additional subclass specializations that you will unlock later in the game by completing a character progression quest. For instance, mages can specialize as knight enchanters, necromancers, or rift mages. My main gripe with Inquisition's character classes is that they removed blood magic as one of the specializations. I mean, what the hell, man? How am I gonna roleplay as an evil blood mage if you take the specialization out of the game? That's an L for Inquisition as far as I'm concerned, but other than that, the options available in character creation are pretty solid. Depending on which options you choose for race and class, you'll also get assigned a basic background. This operates similar to origin stories in the first game, just without the unique prologue or extensive dialogue options referring to your background. It does come up occasionally, and some characters will refer to you by your family name, i.e. Inquisitor Llewellyn, Inquisitor Trevelyan, etc. It's just a bit of flavor without too much depth to it though. Where Inquisition's character creator starts to fall off is the actual appearance slider options, particularly for hairstyles. For men, there are less than 30 hairstyles, and about a third of them are just different variations of the fade cut. So if you want more options for a slick hairdo, you're gonna have to look for mods. But now that we've dissected the character creator, let's dive into the combat. The combat in Dragon Age Inquisition is what we call real-time with pause strategy combat. That's a mouthful, I know, but the essence of the system is right there in the name. You control a party of up to 4 characters, your main plus 3 companions. And at any point in combat, you can pause the action and queue up different abilities for your team. Combat is centered on a mix of auto attacks, abilities, and consumable items like potions and bombs. I've tried all the classes and subclasses at this point, and my favorite builds are Templars, Knight Enchanters, and DPS-focused mages. The sound effects and animations of spell glyphs in particular are really weighty and satisfying. It's so fun to place a magical glyph on the ground and watch an enemy trigger a glorious explosion the moment they step on it. If you want to deal more damage and be really effective in combat, then you'll want to focus on ability combos. For example, if you use Frost Step followed by Winter's Grasp with the Winter's Ruin upgrade, you'll receive a 1000% damage bonus. Or if you've got a Templar, you can use Spell Purge followed by Wrath of Heaven for massive AoE damage that also stuns your opponents. One other thing you should be keenly aware of are guard and barrier effects. You see these blue bars or little metal spikes that show up on enemy HP bars? Yeah, those represent barriers and armor. and if you try to bust through those with regular attacks, it's gonna take forever and you're gonna have a bad time. So if an enemy pops a blue barrier, use Dispel to easily crack through it. And if an enemy applies a guard buff, use a warrior ability like Shield Bash to break it. You can also apply these buffs to your own team to make them tankier, so keep that in mind. Real-time with pause combat really holds a special place in my heart. I love the original Baldur's Gate games, Pathfinder, and Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. But today, there really aren't that many games like this anymore. Most RPGs have either pivoted to fully turn-based combat, a la Baldur's Gate 3, or they've gone in a more action-focused direction. Games like Elden Ring, and even the new Dragon Age game coming out this year. So Dragon Age Inquisition and games of this nature provide a really unique experience that is difficult to find in modern RPGs. But for many Dragon Age fans, the combat is not the thing that really got them to fall in love with this franchise. It's the writing, characters, and storytelling that provided the emotional hook they needed to get into the series. So let's dive into some of the companions and romance arcs we can experience in Inquisition. The game has some of my favorite companions in the whole franchise. Dorian, Iron Bull, and Varric are my favorites, and Solas is really interesting too. If you know, you know. Plus, we get to see cameos from my favorite companions from the first game too, Liliana, Morrigan, and even Alistair in some circumstances. Inquisition has 9 companions and 3 advisors, so you'll be rolling deep with characters to yap with, and even romance. Inquisition also revamped the companion approval system from previous games. Rather than seeing a numeric score in the character sheet, the companion approval meter is now hidden from the player. You will know whether your companions approve or disapprove of your actions by a little pop-up that happens in dialogue, but you can't see where their relationship stands specifically. If you've played Fallout 4, then this will be familiar to you. Inquisition sports the most romance options we've seen in a Dragon Age game so far. 8 of the companions and advisor characters can be romanced by the player, though there are some restrictions based on your character's background. For instance, Solas will only entertain a relationship with an elven female. I think my favorite romance is Iron Bull, mostly because of this scene where all your advisors start barging into your room one by one and react pretty strongly to the sight of our Kunari companion in the bed.
Sorry to disturb your rest, Inquisitor, but our Oh, sweet maker.
Cullen, how's it going?
Is the Inquisitor awake? I thought perhaps we...
Can I help either of you with something?
I'm so sorry.
I cannot move my legs.
Is something the matter? Ah!
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Do you see this?
No.
So, I take it...
Actually, he's the one who's been taking it.
Outside of romance, the player will make a lot of choices in the main story and significant side quests. Now, I want to start off by saying this. Bioware went all out with the main story quests and companion quests. This game has some of my favorite content in the series, but the game also suffers from major pacing issues. You see, there's one fatal flaw with Dragon Age Inquisition's progression, and that is the power system. Aside from your character levels, you will have to grind out power, which is a proxy for representing how powerful the Inquisition has become in Thedas. In order to unlock main story missions, you will have to spend power, and if you don't have enough power to do the next mission, then you have to go out and do a bunch of random bullshit. This will likely happen to you relatively early in the game, whenever you need to meet with the Templars or mages. And this is where the meme of getting trapped in the hinterlands comes from. The hinterlands is basically the tutorial zone of Inquisition. It's the first major map you will unlock, and it's where the player will really start to see how empty the side content is in this game. Bioware put a lot of work into the main story and companion quests, but the rest of the side content is cookie-cutter MMO style quests. Collect 10 ram hides, collect a bunch of plants for a potion, kill X amount of enemies at this location, and so on and so forth. It's mind-numbingly boring, especially when you'd rather be doing main story content or progressing companion quest lines. And this is a good time to talk about the exploration. Inquisition came out at a time when the devs were trying to replicate the success of Skyrim and Far Cry 3, so Bioware decided to turn Dragon Age into an open-world game as well. Inquisition is not a true open-world game, since its zones are separate maps, but each zone is incredibly open and expansive. So here's the thing with Inquisition's open world zones. The game is absolutely gorgeous. I'm still blown away by the beauty of the Emerald Graves in particular. But there's just one problem. There's nothing really interesting to do out here. The exploration in Inquisition is quite lackluster. All you really do is collect crafting resources, fight mobs, close fade rifts, and hunt down shards. Don't even get me started with the shards. In one of my playthroughs, I collected every single one of these things. Wasn't worth it. Wish I had my time back, to be honest. Now, if Bioware had actually created some stellar side quests that we could stumble upon in the open world, or some legendary weapons and armor that felt substantially different from anything else we'd find in the game, I wouldn't have this complaint, because they would have given us a reason to explore. Honestly, the most interesting thing you can find in the open world are the high dragons. These dragon fights are incredibly fun and rewarding from a gameplay perspective, but you could just look up a guide to where they are all located and save yourself the time of running around in barren, empty maps. So let's talk about choice and consequence in Dragon Age Inquisition. I will be keeping this section spoiler-free. One cool thing about Dragon Age Inquisition is that you can import your decisions from the previous 2 games. So if you've played Dragon Age Origins and Dragon Age 2, then I recommend setting up an account on Dragon Age Keep, picking your choices from the previous games, and then importing that world state into Inquisition when you start a new playthrough. That way your previous decisions will be represented in the game. If Inquisition is your first Dragon Age game, then you don't need to worry about this, just pick the default world state. Now, I gotta keep things kind of vague here to avoid spoilers, but let's just say if you like making big decisions in RPGs that have massive consequences and branching paths, then you're gonna like Dragon Age Inquisition. However, there is one big flaw with the choices in this game. Whenever you're presented with a big choice in Dragon Age Inquisition, if you hover over the different choices, it displays a little text box showing what the consequences of this decision will be. That way you can make an informed decision, and you're not going to be taken by surprise. I have very mixed feelings about this system. Part of the fun in making choices in a game like this is seeing how things will pan out. So if the game just tells you what the outcome of your action is gonna be, it's like, hello, spoiler alert. Now, to be fair, they don't spell out everything that will happen as the result of your choice. For instance, sometimes when you make a big decision, it may damage a relationship with one of your companions, even to the point where they leave the Inquisition. But the little text box doesn't tell you that. So you can still be surprised, but I don't know, it takes some of the fun out of the big decisions when you know what the outcome is gonna be. So you never really get that first playthrough vibe of being completely caught off guard by an outcome. Aside from quest choices, you'll also oversee the day-to-day operations of the Inquisition from your war table and throne. War table operations are these brief text adventures that are time-gated with a real-world clock, kinda like a mobile game. This definitely feels a bit out of place in Dragon Age, but if you don't like this feature, there are mods that will remove the time gating to make your operations complete automatically. War table operations will net you resources, and in some cases open up new quest content. Throne judgments are really fun. Basically, you get to decide the fate of various criminals and ne'er-do-wells that you come across during the story. Inquisition does a good job of making the player feel powerful and like they are truly in charge of a big organization. As opposed to games like Skyrim, where you become the head of a guild and then still get sent out on some BS fetch quests or busy work, your allies and advisors all defer to your judgment, though some may be angry with the choices you end up making. So let's talk about the DLC. If you enjoy the base game, Inquisition also has 3 major story expansions to help you get that extra fix of Dragon Age. But are they worth your time? In my opinion, Trespasser is the only DLC that is a must-play for this game. It's absolutely incredible and helps set up the story for the next Dragon Age game, so you should definitely check it out if you have the time. Jaws of Hakon and The Descent are both okay expansions, but you can easily skip them if you don't have the time or desire. So, at the end of the day, is Dragon Age Inquisition still worth playing today? Well, I already spoiled the answer, but yes, it's definitely worth playing if you're a fan of RPGs or fantasy games. It's a great game that admittedly has a bunch of flaws, but the good aspects of Inquisition far outweigh its faults. So there you have it, my review of Dragon Age Inquisition for 2024. If you liked this video, be sure to subscribe to Big Dan Gaming for more RPG videos and reviews. Big shout out to all the channel members for supporting my content. Until next time, this has been Big Dan. I should go.